It was a Friday, 7:45 in the evening. Full house. 38 tables, every single one of them taken. 4 burners going on the hot station. Danny had been working on the rib sauce for 8 minutes instead of 6, and I was just about to say something about that, when a man in a light button-down with a folder under his arm appeared from behind Lena, our hostess. I know that kind of folder. Lena looked at me with the expression of someone who had just stepped into a puddle in brand new shoes. "Maya, there's someone here from City Health, says there's a complaint." I didn't say anything. I pulled off my glove, handed the spoon to Danny. He understood without a word, good man, and walked out of the kitchen. The man's name was Kevin Park. Early 30s, tired, clearly not wanting to be here on a Friday night. I understood. I didn't want to be anywhere near this either. Specifically, I didn't want to be in a parallel universe where my restaurant was receiving anonymous complaints 3 weeks before our license renewal. "I need to inspect cold storage and review personnel documents," he said. "Of course, follow me." My voice was perfectly even, 9 years of practice. Walking through the kitchen, I caught Priya's eye. She read it immediately and stepped up to my station without a word. That's why I keep her. Priya knows if the chef walks out mid-service, something is serious. Don't panic, hold the pace. I know how to hold the pace. That much I know. Later, much later, when everything was over, the restaurant, the marriage, the illusions, I would come back to this moment. Walking through my own kitchen with an inspector at my back, thinking only one thing: who did this? The answer turned out to be simpler than I expected. And worse, Kevin Park did a thorough job. Cold storage, temperature logs, personnel files, sanitation records. 40 minutes. I walked with him through every inch of my kitchen and answered every question. Calmly, professionally, the way you handle things you've built with your own hands and know better than anyone. He found nothing. Of course he found nothing. My kitchen is clean, has been every single day for 7 years. At the end of the inspection, he stood at the service entrance and tucked the folder back under his arm. "Everything's in order," he said. "No violations. I'll file the report Monday." "Thank you," I said. He was already turning toward the door when he added, almost offhand, "the way you add something you think doesn't really matter." The complaint was very detailed. Specific dates, specific menu items. Usually anonymous complaints are something like, "I thought the kitchen looked dirty." But this one, he gave a small shrug. "Whoever sent it knew exactly what to look for." I nodded, thanked him again, closed the door, walked back into the kitchen. "Everything okay?" Priya asked, not turning from the stove. "Everything's fine," I said. That was a lie, obviously. But a kitchen in the middle of service is no place for the truth. A kitchen is where you do what needs doing until you can afford to think. I took my station back, picked up the spoon, tasted the sauce Danny had oversalted by 0.5 gram. I added cream quietly, balanced it out. Called the order for table 12. Checked the timing on table 7. Everything running as it should. And in my head, on a loop. Specific dates, specific menu items. We change the menu 4 times a year. I keep a spreadsheet, what goes in, what comes out, the date of each change. That spreadsheet lives in our shared Google Drive. I have access. Nate has access. Priya has read-only, she can't edit. Danny has none at all, he handles deliveries, no reason for him to be in there. Nobody else. You know what's strange about being a chef? You can spend 8 hours on a stock and never look away for a second, or it scorches. That kind of work disciplines the mind, teaches you to track several things at once. Temperature, timing, what's happening at every station. That Friday night, I ran the service. And alongside it, very quietly, I started to think, specific dates. We launched the new fall menu on the 23rd of September, added 3 items, cut 2. I remember that day, Nate brought coffee right into the kitchen, kissed my temple, said he was proud of me. I thought, that's why I love him. He knows when to show up. The 23rd of September was in the spreadsheet. I finished service. Last table out at 11:40. Priya was breaking down cold storage, Danny cleaning his station, Lena counting tips at the bar. Heading out? Danny asked, pulling on his jacket. Not yet, I said. Supply orders for next week. He nodded, left. I poured myself a glass of the Grenache we keep for staff, opened my laptop, and started looking. I want to tell you something about Google Drive before I go further. It keeps a history. Not just versions of the document, it tracks who viewed it and when. Most people don't think about that. Why would they? It's just a menu spreadsheet. Who cares who opened it? I started caring at 11:53 on a Friday night with a glass of wine and an inspector's words in my head. I found the file. Opened version history. Then, see who has viewed. Nate Sullivan. 5 views over the past 2 months. I sat and looked at that for a moment, then scrolled to the dates. October 12th, October 18th, October 29th, November 3rd, and the last one today, November 15th, 11:02 in the morning. The complaint was filed with City Health at 1 in the afternoon. I took a sip of wine, set down the glass, kept looking at the screen. I didn't immediately decide it was him. I'm not someone who draws conclusions from a single coincidence. I'm the person who tastes the stock every 40 minutes for 8 hours because flavor shifts gradually and you have to catch the moment. One coincidence isn't a flavor. It's just a temperature reading. But 5 views in 2 months, that's a pattern. Nate had never shown any interest in the menu spreadsheet, not once in 7 years. That was my territory. He handled finances, suppliers, the lease, licenses. I handled food. We'd agreed on that from the beginning, and it worked. Worked, I thought. I opened our text thread, scrolled back October, September, August. Looking for something. I wasn't sure what, just looking. Nothing unusual. Don't forget the supplier Wednesday. Lena wants Saturday off, okay? Running late, don't wait up. Normal messages, 7 years of them. Then I opened our joint business account, just to look, just to see everything. And there I found something interesting. Not right away. I scrolled for 10 minutes and everything looked normal: rent, suppliers, payroll, utilities. Then I saw a payment from October 21st. $900. Recipient. Meridian Advisory Group, LLC. I didn't know what that was. I searched it. The website was minimal, gray, 3 lines of text. Meridian Advisory Group, consulting for commercial transactions and business restructuring. A phone number. A downtown address. Nothing else. I closed the laptop, stood up, walked through my empty kitchen, past the clean stations, the dark burners, the whiteboard where I write the weekly prep plan in marker. 38 tables in the dining room. 7 years of these walls. The smell that never really leaves even after everything's shut down, garlic, butter, something sweet drifting from the dessert station. We opened when I was 31. Nate said, "Let's take the risk." I said, "Okay." We put in everything we had, and then some on credit. The first year I worked without a day off. Literally, checking prep on Sundays, meeting suppliers on Mondays. Nate kept the books, handled the landlord, managed everything I couldn't get to. This was our restaurant, both of ours. Meridian Advisory Group, commercial transactions and restructuring. I went back to the laptop, pulled up the site again, wrote down the phone number, then checked for another payment to them. Found one. November 5th, $1,200, $2,100 in consulting fees for commercial transactions. In 6 weeks, that Nate had not mentioned once. I finished my wine, turned off the light, drove home. Nate was asleep, or seemed to be. I lay down beside him and looked at the ceiling until 4 in the morning. Cassie Nguyen is the only lawyer I know personally, and the only person I could call on a Saturday at 8 in the morning without apologizing. We met freshman year. She was studying law, I was at the culinary school in the next building. We lived in the same dorm and shared a microwave. 20 years ago. She became a corporate attorney at a solid firm, I became a chef. We see each other maybe 3 times a year, but there are people you don't need to talk to often, it's enough that they exist. Nate left for the gym at 7:30. I waited until his car pulled out of the driveway. Then I picked up my phone. Cassie answered on the third ring. "Early for you," she said instead of hello. "I need to talk through something." A pause. She heard something in my voice, Cassie always does. "Go ahead." I told her everything. The city health complaint, the spreadsheet, 5 views, the dates, Meridian Advisory Group, $2,100 in fees for commercial transactions that no one had mentioned to me. Cassie listened without interrupting. That's her best skill, listening in a way that makes you hear yourself. When I finished, she was quiet for a few seconds. "Have you read your operating agreement?" she asked. "What?" "Your LLC operating agreement. The founding document. Have you read it?" I opened my mouth, closed it. "I signed it," I said finally, 7 years ago. "That's not the same as reading it." "No, it isn't, I knew that. I just never thought it would matter because Nate and I were a team, and why would a team read the fine print about each other? We trusted each other. I trusted him. Here's the first thing I learned from all of this, if you want it. Trust is a beautiful thing, but you still need to read the operating agreement. "Find the document," Cassie said, "before you talk to him, before you call that Meridian, before anything. Document first." "Why?" "Because if he's negotiating a sale of a shared asset without your consent, everything depends on what your agreement says. What rights each of you holds. Whether a sale requires both partners to agree. What happens if one partner objects? This isn't fine print, Maya, this is your position. What if it says he only needs a majority, 51%? How are the ownership shares divided? 50-50. Then he can't sell anything without your signature, she said. But only if there's no separate clause. Which is why document first. I found it in 20 minutes. A folder in our home safe. Nate had always been meticulous about paperwork, and somewhere along the way, I'd picked up the habit from him. 12 pages stapled together, signatures on the last one. Mine, his, a notary stamp. Dated March 9th, 7 years ago. I sat down at the kitchen table and read it. Really read it, not the way I had in the notary's office. When Nate was flipping through pages saying this part is standard, this too, sign here. I'd believed him that it was standard. We'd just gotten the loan, found the space. We were so full of momentum that fine print felt like a formality. Page 3, Management and Voting. I read slowly. Read it again. Section 3.4, Decisions requiring unanimous consent of both members. Sale, transfer, or other disposition of material company assets. Merger or reorganization. Dissolution of the company. I read it one more time. Unanimous consent. Both members, he could not sell without me. Legally impossible. Whatever he was discussing with Meridian Advisory Group, without my signature, it was just conversation. I called Cassie. Unanimous, I said. Good, she said. That's your position. Now the question is, do you want to understand what he's actually doing, or do you want to stop it right now? 3 seconds. I want to understand first. Then listen carefully, Cassie said. And don't take a single step without me. Philip Torres worked out of a small office on the 3rd floor of a commercial building on Clement Street. No name on the door, just the suite number. Cassie had warned me. He doesn't advertise, only referrals. That's a good sign. Tuesday, 10 in the morning, Nate thought I was meeting with our seafood supplier. Torres was around 60, short, with heavy-framed glasses. 3 calculators on his desk. I didn't ask why 3. He asked for documents right away. 3 years of tax returns, monthly revenue figures, the lease, outstanding loans, equipment. I'd brought everything. Cassie had told me exactly what to take. He studied it all in silence for about 20 minutes. I sat across from him and looked out the window at the street below. Here's something strange. I was completely calm. Not the calm that comes when everything is fine. The other kind. The kind that arrives when you've already accepted that fine isn't coming, and now you just want the exact numbers. Good business, Torres said finally. No inflection, just fact. Stable traffic, solid margins for your segment, location with room to grow. You were profitable by year 3. Year 2, I said. He looked up. A slight reassessment in his eyes. Year 2. He went back to the papers. All right, let's work through it. He picked up one of the calculators, started talking through the math out loud methodically without rushing. Revenue multiplied by the standard multiplier for restaurant sector businesses. Add equipment value. Factor in the lease terms and years remaining. Add goodwill, reputation, repeat clientele, name recognition in the market. I listened. And alongside his numbers, I was holding another figure in my head. An approximate one, but close enough. Cassie had learned it through her own contacts. Nate had quoted a price to the buyer, $850,000 for the entire business. Torres finished his calculation, took off his glasses, looked at me. At current performance, fair market value for this establishment is between $1,600,000 and $1,800,000, depending on who's buying and on what terms. If it's a hospitality group with resources, closer to the top. I didn't speak for a few seconds. $850,000, I said quietly. Not a question, just out loud. Torres looked at me. Someone named that figure? Yes. He carefully stacked my documents, lined up the edges. That's just under half of fair market value, he said. Even accounting for the fact that buyers always negotiate down, that's a very low starting point. Very. Why would someone quote that number? He paused. Then said carefully, the way people do when they deal with unpleasant facts for a living. Usually there are 2 reasons. First, the seller doesn't know the real value. Second, they know, but for some reason want to sell quickly and cheap. For example, if the seller is receiving something else in addition to the official price, through a separate agreement, or if the seller wants the other party to receive as little as possible. The other party, that was me. 50% of $850,000 was $425. 50% of $1,700,000 was $850. The difference was $425,000. This wasn't a miscalculation. This wasn't ignorance of the market. Nate had run our finances for 7 years. He knew exactly what we'd built. This was a plan. I thanked Torres. He gave me the official appraisal report, 4 pages, stamped and signed. I tucked it into my bag next to the operating agreement. Outside, it was cold. I got in the car and sat there for a while. 7 years ago, we stood in this empty space before the renovation, concrete floor, exposed pipes, the smell of someone else's failed attempt. Nate had put his arms around me from behind and said, "Imagine, right here will be your kitchen. Not our kitchen, yours, because he knew it was mine. And now he wanted to sell that kitchen for half what it was worth, so I'd get less." I took out my phone and texted Cassie, got the report. Number confirmed. What's next? She replied in 2 minutes. Now we go after his documents. I need to say something about the drive from Torres' office back to the restaurant. I sat in the car outside his building for a few minutes before I started the engine. Not because I was falling apart. I wasn't. I was doing that thing I do after a hard service when everything has finally gone out the door and the kitchen goes quiet. Taking stock. Running through what just happened, what it means, what comes next. What came next was, I needed to know the full shape of what Nate was doing. The number from Tours told me the sale was underpriced, but I didn't yet know why. There's always a why. You don't build a plan this carefully without a reason that makes sense to you. I drove to the restaurant and ran prep for the evening, kept my hands busy, let my mind work. Nate got home from the restaurant at 1:30. I told him the seafood supplier meeting had run long. He didn't ask anything further. That night, I slept 4 hours. Nate left for the restaurant at 1 in the afternoon the next day. Said he wanted to check the first delivery from our new supplier. We'd recently switched seafood vendors. Early shipments always need attention. I said I'd come in for opening. I waited until his car turned the corner. Then I went to his office. Nate keeps a small home office in what used to be the guest room. We converted it in year 3 of living together. A desk, 2 monitors, a shelving unit with folders. Very organized. Nate is the kind of person who has a place for every piece of paper. I'd always considered that a virtue. Right now, it was helping me. I wasn't sure exactly what I was looking for. Cassie had said, look for something physical. People who make side deals often print drafts, old habit, especially people who grew up before cloud storage. Something tangible to bring to a meeting, show across a table, sign. I started with the shelving unit. Folders labeled in his handwriting, neat, slightly slanted. Lease, insurance, taxes, 3 years' worth, suppliers, equipment, all familiar, all things I'd seen 100 times. Then the bottom shelf. 3 folders with no labels. First one, old bank statements, nothing interesting. Second, appliance warranties. The third was thinner than the others. I opened it. A few pages. The top one was a printed email. Sender: j.brennan@crestvviewhospitality.com. To Nate Sullivan. Date: October 22nd. Crestview Hospitality. I knew that name. A small but growing group, 3 locations in the city, 2 in San Jose. Good spots, upper middle market. I'd never thought of them as competition. We worked in different niches. I read the email standing up. Jason Brennan, managing director of Crestview, based on the signature, was writing to Nate. The tone was businesslike, almost friendly. He said they were glad the negotiations were progressing. The final offer on the assets was $850,000. They understood the figure was below market, but he wrote, the package compensates for that. I stopped, read that sentence again. Then I turned to the next paragraph. Brennan wrote that the vice president of operations position remained on the table. Base salary of $145,000, quarterly performance bonuses, an equity option after 2 years. The official offer letter would follow once the main agreement was signed. I set the page down. Underneath, it was a handwritten sheet, grid paper, his pencil, his handwriting. He'd been doing math. Sale price, $850,000. Divided in half, $425,000 to me, $425,000 to him. Then a second column. Just his. Base salary, $145,000 a year. Bonuses, roughly $40,000, conservative estimate. Total per year, $185,000. At the bottom, underlined twice, after 3 years, close to $1 million. He had calculated his future, neatly, in pencil on a sheet of grid paper. My line was one entry, $425,000, and after that, I wasn't in the equation anymore. I stood in his office and looked at that piece of paper. You know what's strange? I didn't cry. I didn't even feel that sharp moment when everything collapses. It was more like what sometimes happens in the kitchen when you cut yourself. There's no pain at first. You just look at the cut and think, there it is. That's what happened. The pain comes later. I photographed everything. The email, the handwritten sheet, both pages. Put the folder back exactly as I'd found it, walked out of the office. Closed the door, called Cassie. Found it, I said. Vice President of Operations at Crestview Hospitality. 145 base plus bonuses. He's already calculated his next 3 years. Silence. Then, did he calculate only himself? Only himself. I see, her voice shifted, not angry, focused. Then we need to do some calculating too. Come tomorrow morning. And Maya, until then, act normal. Don't change anything. I drove to the restaurant and thought about what act normal meant. Smile. Ask how the supplier meeting went. Eat dinner at the same table. Sleep in the same bed. For 7 years, I'd been building something I thought we were building together. He'd been building an exit. The difference between us turned out to be simple. I thought we were on the same team. He was thinking 3 years ahead without me. Fine. Now I'd think ahead too, without him. Cassie lives 20 minutes from us. Her office is across town. When she said, "Come in the morning," I knew she didn't mean the office. Wednesday, 8:30. Cassie's kitchen is small and always smells like coffee. She starts at 6. I've known this for 20 years. A notepad was already on the table. She'd studied the photos I sent the night before, the Brennan email, the handwritten calculations, and now she was looking at me over her glasses. "Good news or bad news?" she said. "Good news. Good news, you have a strong position, very strong." She opened the notepad. "Bad news, he probably knows that, which is why he wasn't in any hurry to ask you." I poured myself coffee. Sat down, walk me through it. "Here's where you stand. Your operating agreement requires unanimous consent for any sale. That means without your signature, Crestview gets nothing. Ever, under any circumstances. There's no working around that in court. It's not ambiguous language, it's black and white." She tapped her pen on the notepad. "That's the first thing. Second, he's been negotiating the sale of a joint asset without notifying the other partner. That's a breach of fiduciary duty. Simply put, he had an obligation to keep you informed, not to ask permission for every step, but to inform you. He didn't. What does that give me? Grounds for a lawsuit. Not just he tried to sell without me. A breach of partner fiduciary duty with demonstrable financial harm." She wrote something in the notepad. "Third, and this is the interesting part, the underpriced sale combined with the side deal isn't just bad negotiating. It can be characterized as intentional harm to the other partner's financial interests. He wasn't just trying to sell, he structured the deal specifically so you'd receive the minimum." She paused to let that land. "How much can I recover?" I asked. Cassie looked at me directly, the way people do when they want to make sure you're ready to hear the answer. "In a standard business dissolution, 50% of fair market value. Using Taurus midpoint, 1,700,000. Your share, 850,000. That's the baseline. And not the baseline. If we file suit for breach of fiduciary duty with evidence of intent, we can seek additional damages." His handwritten calculations are a gift, Maya. He literally wrote out that your share was a fixed number while he was projecting his own income for 3 years forward. That's intent on paper. A pause. "My colleague handles commercial litigation. I've already spoken to him, no names, just the framework. He thinks we can reach 1 million plus his legal fees." 1 million. From 850,000, the full business at his price, to 1 million just for my share. "But," said Cassie, and I heard something important in that word. "But, a lawsuit is a year. Minimum could be 18 months. During that time the restaurant operates, you're both still co-owners, everything is in limbo. That's pressure on the business, on your staff, on you." She paused. "There's a second path. Faster and possibly cleaner." "Tell me." "You come to him with what you know, the documents, the tour's report, the Brennan email, and you make an offer. He buys out your share at fair market value, 850,000, your half of the real price, plus compensation for 4 months of negotiations without notifying you. Call that 200,000. Total, 1,050,000. He gets the restaurant, goes to his Crestview, moves on with his life. You get your money, exit the business cleanly, no court. Why would he agree? Because the alternative is a lawsuit he'll likely lose, public documents about his side deal, and Crestview will probably pull the job offer once there's litigation attached to their new acquisition. Cassie closed the notepad. He's a smart man. You said he's good at calculating. I looked at her garden through the window. He's good at calculating. That's true, better than I'd realized as it turned out. When do I go to him? I asked. When you're ready. Not before. She stood, refilled her coffee. You need to walk in there calm with your documents, knowing every number, not as a hurt wife who got blindsided. The difference is everything. I'm not a hurt wife, I said. Cassie looked at me. A small, almost invisible smile. I know, that's why you're going to win. I drove home thinking about what Cassie had said. There's a moment in preparing any complex dish. When all the components are ready, every temperature is set, and you simply wait for the right second to begin. Not early, not late, exactly. I was almost ready. One question remained that I hadn't fully answered for myself yet. Why, not how, I knew that, not what that too, but why he'd chosen this particular path. Why he hadn't talked to me. Why 7 years together, and then a quiet exit through the back door with someone else's money and someone else's job title. That question I was going to ask him in person. Sunday, I stayed home. Nate was cheerful, suggested the farmer's market, then lunch. I said I wasn't feeling great. He made me tea, sat beside me, asked if I needed anything. I looked at him and thought, he's very good at this. He always was. We met at a bar, I know, not original. I was 26, just back from a stage in Lyon, full of plans and completely broke. He bought me a glass of wine and asked what I did. I said I wanted to open a restaurant. He didn't laugh. Didn't say that sounds risky or are you sure? He said, tell me more. 9 years. Not once did I doubt he was on my side. That's maybe the strangest feeling of all, sitting beside someone you've known for 9 years, drinking tea he made for you, feeling the ground slowly shifting under your feet. Not a collapse, just a quiet, gradual settling. On Monday, he drove to the restaurant at 9 for a supplier meeting. I went in to open up. Lena came in at 11, her shift started at noon. She always arrived an hour early. Her habit, and I valued it. I hadn't planned anything. Honestly, I just poured us both coffee and said I wanted to ask her something. Casually, no formality. Lena looked at me. She has this way of making eye contact, very direct. She almost never looks away first. 28 years old, with us since opening day, knows every table like she named it herself, meaning she remembers who sat where on every important night. 3 weeks ago, give or take, I started. After close. Did anyone come in to look at the dining room? She didn't answer right away, picked up her mug, took a sip. Nate said it was about the renovation, she said finally. That you were thinking about changing the lighting. We're not thinking about changing the lighting. Silence. Lena set down her mug, looked sideways, the first time in the conversation she'd broken eye contact. There were 2 of them. A man around 50 and a younger one, probably an assistant. Nate walked them through the dining room, showed them the kitchen. I thought, she stopped. They were talking about the ventilation and the square footage. I really did think it was a renovation. How long were they here? 40 minutes, maybe more. I was heading out, Nate said he'd lock up. I nodded. Why didn't you tell me? She looked at me directly again. Because Nate asked me not to. Said he wanted to surprise you with the new lighting, that you like things to be done before you hear about them. A pause. Maya, I didn't know it wasn't a renovation, I swear. I believed her. It was visible, she sat straight, but her fingers on the mug had gone white. Lena felt guilty for something that wasn't her fault, a familiar feeling. I'd been trying it on myself all weekend. "It's okay," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong." "What's going on?" I looked at her. 7 years. She'd been here since day one. Been at our wedding staff table, but she was there. She knew this restaurant as well as I did. "I don't know exactly yet," I said, "but I'm going to find out." She nodded slowly, then said quietly, "The older man, when he was leaving, he turned back and looked at the room. Like this." She demonstrated a slow look over the shoulder, measured, taking everything in. Like he was calculating something. You know that expression? I know it. I do the same thing in the kitchen after a long service, running the numbers on what worked and what didn't. That man had been running the numbers on my restaurant. I finished my coffee, told Lena I'd come to her if there were more questions, asked her to keep this between us for now. She nodded, started to leave, then turned back at the door. "Maya," she hesitated. "This isn't a sale, is it?" I smiled, tried to make it look calm. "Not without me," I said. "It's not." Philip Torres worked out of a small office on the 3rd floor of a commercial building on Clement Street. No name on the door, just the suite number. Cassie had warned me, "He doesn't advertise, only referrals." That's a good sign. Tuesday, 10 in the morning. Nate thought I was meeting with our seafood supplier. Torres was around 60, short, with heavy-framed glasses. 3 calculators on his desk. I didn't ask why 3. He asked for documents right away. 3 years of tax returns, monthly revenue figures, the lease, outstanding loans, equipment. I'd brought everything. Cassie had told me exactly what to take. He studied it all in silence for about 20 minutes. I sat across from him and looked out the window at the street below. Here's something strange. I was completely calm. Not the calm that comes when everything is fine. The other kind. The kind that arrives when you've already accepted that fine isn't coming, and now you just want the exact numbers. "Good business," Torres said finally. No inflection, just fact. "Stable traffic, solid margins for your segment, location with room to grow. You were profitable by year 3. "Year 2, I said. He looked up, a slight reassessment in his eyes. "Year 2. He went back to the papers. "All right, let's work through it." He picked up one of the calculators, began talking through the math out loud, methodically, without rushing. Revenue multiplied by the sector multiplier. Equipment added in. Lease terms, years remaining. Goodwill, reputation, repeat customers, name recognition. I listened. And in parallel, I was holding another number in my head, an approximate one, but close enough. Cassie had learned it through her own contacts. Nate had named $850,000 as his asking price for the whole business. Torres finished, took off his glasses, looked at me. "At current performance, fair market value for this establishment is between $1,600,000 and $1,800,000, depending on who's buying and on what terms. If it's a hospitality group with real resources, closer to the top." I didn't speak for a moment. $850,000, I said quietly. Not a question, just out loud. Torres looked at me. "Someone named that figure?" "Yes." He carefully stacked my documents, aligned the edges. "That's just under half of fair market value," he said. "Even accounting for buyer negotiation, that's a very low opening number." "Very? Why would someone start that low?" He paused, then said carefully, the way people do when they've spent years dealing with unpleasant truths. "There are usually 2 reasons. 1, the seller doesn't know what the business is actually worth. 2, they know, but for some reason need to sell quickly and cheaply. Such as the seller is receiving something else outside the official price, a separate agreement. Or the seller wants the other party to end up with as little as possible. The other party, that was me. 50% of 850,000 was 425. 50% of 1,700,000 was 850. The gap was $425,000. This was not an honest mistake. Nate had run our finances for 7 years. He knew exactly what we had built. This was a plan I thanked Tors. He handed me the formal appraisal, 4 pages, stamped and signed. I put it in my bag next to the operating agreement. Outside, it was cold. I got in the car and sat there. 9 years ago, Nate, and I stood in the empty space before the renovation, concrete floors, bare pipes, the smell of someone else's abandoned idea. He put his arms around me from behind and said, "Right here will be your kitchen. Not our kitchen, yours," because he knew it was mine. And now he wanted to sell that kitchen for half its worth so I'd walk away with less. I took out my phone and texted Cassie, got the report. Number confirmed. What's next? She replied in 2 minutes. Now we go after his documents. Nate left for the restaurant at 1 o'clock. He wanted to check the first delivery from our new supplier. Early shipments always need a look. I said I'd come in for the evening service. I waited until his car turned the corner. Then I went to his office. Nate keeps a home office in what used to be the guest room, desk, 2 monitors, a shelving unit. Very organized. Every piece of paper has a place. I had always thought of this as one of his better qualities. Right now, it was working in my favor. I wasn't certain what I was looking for. Cassie had said, "Look for something physical." People who make side arrangements often print drafts, old habit, especially those who grew up before everything lived in the cloud. Something to carry to a meeting, lay on a table, sign. I started with the shelving unit. Folders in his handwriting, neat, slightly slanted. Lease, insurance, tax returns, suppliers, equipment, all familiar, bottom shelf. 3 unlabeled folders. First, old bank statements. Second, appliance warranties. The third was thinner. I opened it, a few pages. The top one was a printed email from j.brennan@crestvviewhospitality.com to Nate Sullivan. October 22nd. Crestview Hospitality, I knew that name. A small but growing group, 3 locations in the city, 2 down in San Jose. Good spots, upper middle market. I'd never seen them as competition, different niches. I read the email standing up without sitting down. Jason Brennan, managing director, based on his signature, was writing to Nate. The tone was businesslike, almost collegial. He said they were glad negotiations were moving forward. The final offer on the assets was $850,000. He acknowledged the figure was below market, but wrote that the full package compensated for that. Then there was a second section. The vice president of operations role remained on the table, Brennan wrote. Base salary, $145,000 a year, quarterly performance bonuses. An equity option after 2 years. The formal offer letter would come once the main agreement was signed. I set the page down. Under the email was a handwritten sheet, grid paper, his pencil, his handwriting. He'd been calculating. Sale price, $850,000. Divided in half. My share, $425,000. His share, $425,000. Then a separate column. Only his. Annual salary, $145,000. Bonuses, roughly $40,000 conservative. Total per year, $185,000. At the bottom, underlined twice, close to $1 million after 3 years. He had calculated his entire future, carefully in pencil on a sheet of grid paper. My line was one entry, $425,000, and after that, I wasn't in the equation. I stood in his office and looked at that piece of paper. You know what's strange? I didn't cry. I didn't even feel that sharp moment when things give way. It was more like what happens sometimes in the kitchen when you cut yourself, no pain at first. You just look at the cut and think, there it is. That's what happened. Pain comes later. I photographed everything. The email, the handwritten sheet. Both pages, put the folder back exactly as I'd found it. Left the office. Closed the door, called Cassie. Found it, I said. Vice President of Operations at Crestview Hospitality. 145 base, quarterly bonuses, equity option. He's already mapped out 3 years. Silence. Then, did he account for you in those 3 years? One line. 425 and then I'm gone. I see. Her voice changed, not angry, just precise. Then we need to do the math too. Come tomorrow morning. And Maya, until then, act normal. Nothing changes. I drove to the restaurant and spent the evening thinking about what act normal meant in practice. Asking how his day went. Eating dinner across the table from him. Sleeping in the same bed. For 7 years, I'd been building something I believed we were building together. He'd been engineering a departure. The difference between us came down to something simple. I thought we were on the same team. He had been thinking 3 years ahead without me in the picture. All right, I could think ahead too. Cassie's kitchen is small and always smells like coffee. Wednesday morning, 8:30. A notepad already on the table. She'd looked at the photos I'd sent the night before, and now she was looking at me. Good news or bad news first, she said. Good. Good news, your position is strong, very strong. She opened the notepad. Bad news, he probably knows that. It's why he never asked you. I poured coffee, sat down. Walk me through it. Your operating agreement requires unanimous consent for any sale of material assets. Without your signature, Crestview gets nothing, not now, not ever. That's not a gray area, it's explicit language. First point. She tapped her pen. Second, he's been in negotiations to sell a jointly owned asset without informing the other partner. That's a breach of fiduciary duty. He had a legal obligation to keep you informed. He didn't. What does that give me? Grounds for a claim, not just he tried to sell without me. A documented breach of partner duty with provable financial harm. She wrote something down. Third, and this is where it gets interesting, the underpriced sale plus the side employment deal together, that's not bad judgment. That's intentional harm to the other partner's financial interests. He didn't just want to sell. He structured the deal to minimize what you'd receive. A moment of quiet. How much can I actually get? I asked. She looked at me the way you look at someone when you need to know they're ready. Standard dissolution, 50% of fair market value. Tor's midpoint, 1,700,000. Your half, 850,000. That's the floor. And above the floor. If we file for breach of fiduciary duty with evidence of intent, we can seek additional damages on top. His handwritten calculations are the best possible evidence, Maya. He wrote down your share as a fixed number while projecting his own earnings across 3 years. That's documented intent. A pause. I've already spoken with my colleague who handles commercial litigation, no names. He thinks we can reach 1 million with his legal fees on top. 1 million. From 850,000 total at his asking price to 1 million just for my share. But, Cassie said, but litigation is a year. Minimum 18 months is more realistic. The whole time the restaurant is running, you're both still on paper as co-owners. Everything is frozen in uncertainty. That's pressure on the business, on your staff, on you. She paused. There's another path. Faster and cleaner. Tell me. You go to him with everything you have. Tor's report, Brennan email, his handwritten sheet. And you propose. He buys out your share at fair market value. 850,000, your half of the real number, plus 200,000 in compensation for 4 months of negotiations without your knowledge. Total 1,050,000. He gets the restaurant, goes to Crestview, starts his new chapter. You get clean money and a clean exit. Why would he take that? Because the alternative is litigation, he will likely lose public court documents describing his side deal, and Crestview will almost certainly rescind the job offer once their name appears in a lawsuit connected to their acquisition. Cassie closed the notepad. He's smart, you said he's good with numbers. I looked at her backyard through the window, November grass, gray and still. He's good with numbers, that's true, better than I'd known as it turned out. When? I asked. When you're ready. Not before. She stood to refill her coffee. Walk in there calm with your documents knowing every figure, not as someone who got blindsided. The distinction matters. I'm not a hurt wife, I said. Cassie looked at me. A small, almost private smile. I know, that's why you'll win. I drove home thinking about what she'd said. There's a moment in any complex dish when every component is ready, every temperature is set, and all that's left is to wait for exactly the right second to start. Not early, not late, I was almost there. But one question I hadn't fully answered for myself. Why, not how, I knew that now, not what, that too, but why he'd chosen this particular path, why he hadn't come to me. Why 7 years, and then a quiet exit through the back door with borrowed money and a borrowed title? That question I was going to ask him myself. Nate got home at 6:30. I heard his car door, then the front door. He always left his shoes in the entryway every single day 9 years. A small habit I'd once found endearing. I was standing at the stove, making pasta, simple, garlic and olive oil, not because I was hungry. I just needed something to do with my hands. Smells good, he said, coming into the kitchen. Sit down, I said. Almost ready. We ate, almost normally. He talked about the supplier, new tuna delivery had been good, fresher than expected. I listened, asked questions, everything as usual. Then I cleared the plates, poured us both water, sat back down. I want to talk about the restaurant, I said. Something in my voice, I'm not sure what, the intonation, the pause before it, made him look at me more carefully. Sure, he said, cautious. I think we need to seriously talk about where we are, as a business, what comes next. I looked at him steadily. I want to know what you're actually thinking, honestly. A pause. He picked up his water glass, drank. What exactly do you mean? The future, your plans. Are you happy with what we're doing? I let a moment pass. Or are you thinking about something else? He looked at me for a few seconds. I watched him think, not about what to say, but about how much to say. There's a difference. I'd learned to see it over 9 years of living with him. I just hadn't known until now that I'd ever need to use it. I think we've built something real, he said finally. Seriously, what we have, it's real. Not an answer to my question, I noticed. Nate, I kept my voice quiet. Are you happy? Right now, in this life, are you genuinely happy? A long pause. Sometimes I think about how things could have gone differently, he said slowly. Not that it's bad, just differently. Differently how? He looked away, down at the table. The restaurant, it's yours, Maya. It always has been. I handled the numbers, the logistics, everything around it. But the real thing there, the thing that matters, that's you. A pause. I sometimes think I'd like something of my own. There it was. Not a confession, not the whole truth, but the edge of it. He had come to the edge and stopped. Something of your own, like what? I asked. He looked at me again, and I saw the moment, 2 seconds, maybe 3, when he could have told me the truth. I saw it in his face. Something shifted, then it closed. Just thoughts, he said. Nothing specific. I'm probably just tired. November is always hard. He smiled. The same smile I'd known for 9 years. Everything's fine, really. I nodded, smiled back. Good, I said. I'm glad we talked. He stood, kissed my temple, habit, automatic, and went to his office. To work, probably, or to do more calculating. I stayed at the table. There was my answer. Not the one he gave, the one he didn't give. He sat across from me, looked me in the eyes, and chose the lie. Not crude, not obvious, quiet, careful, wrapped in fatigue and November. Almost professional. Maybe that's exactly what I needed. Not the documents, not Tor's numbers, not the Brennan email, but this moment. 2 seconds in his eyes. The choice he made when he could have chosen otherwise. Now I knew everything I needed to know. I texted Cassie one word, ready. She replied in a minute, tomorrow at 2. I'll be at the restaurant. I turned off the kitchen light, walked to the bedroom, lay down next to a man I had known for 9 years and did not know at all. I slept well. That surprised me. You know why? Because the most exhausting thing isn't the knowing, it's the not knowing. The suspecting, the checking, the weighing, the doubting yourself. Once you know for certain, something almost like calm sets in. Not good, but calm, like before a big service. Everything is prepped, everything is in place. All that's left is to begin. I called Nate at 11 in the morning. Can you stop by the restaurant around 2? I want you to look at something on the new supplier contract. Of course, he said. Everything okay? Everything's fine, I said. Cassie arrived at 1. I let her and myself, staff didn't come until 4. The dining room was empty. She set up her laptop at the bar, spread out her papers, asked for coffee. I made some. We didn't talk much, not because things were tense, because everything had already been said. All that was left was to do it. At 2:03, the front door opened. Nate walked in wearing his usual jacket, dark navy. He'd had it for 3 years. Looked around. Saw Cassie at the bar. He stopped. 1 second. 2. I watched him calculate. Fast as always. Cassie Nguyen, corporate attorney. Empty restaurant mid-afternoon. Maya standing not in the kitchen but at the bar. He put it together. Maya, he said. His voice was even, but I'd known him for 9 years. Sit down, I said. Let's talk about where we are. He came forward slowly, took a stool across from us. Cassie had her laptop open but wasn't looking at the screen, she was looking at him, professional, still. I laid 3 pages on the bar, one by one. The Tor's appraisal. 4 pages, stamped and signed. Fair market value, $1,680,000. The Brennan email, printed, $850,000. Vice President of Operations. Equity option after 2 years. A photo of his handwritten calculations, his pencil, his paper, his neat columns. My line, $425,000 and then nothing. He looked at the pages. Didn't touch them, just looked. The silence stretched. A car went by outside. Somewhere a faucet dripped, the kitchen sink. I'd been meaning to fix it since last week. Where did you find this? He said finally. Not a question. That's not what matters, I said. Cassie placed her hands flat on the bar. Nathaniel, I'm Cassie Nguyen. I represent Maya's interests as co-owner of Sullivan's LLC. I want to lay out our position before we get to numbers. Her voice was completely even. The kind of voice that reads out facts the way a dial reads temperature. You've been conducting negotiations to sell a jointly owned asset without notifying your partner. That's a breach of fiduciary duty. Section 3.4 of your operating agreement requires unanimous consent for any disposition of material assets. Additionally, the underpriced sale combined with your personal employment arrangement constitutes intentional harm to the other partner's financial interests. We have grounds for litigation. She paused. But we're not here to litigate. We're here to settle. Nate listened. His face was closed. Even he could hold his expression, I knew that. But his fingers on the bar, I saw them. What do you want? He said. Cassie looked at me. My moment. I looked at the man I had spent 9 years with, built a restaurant with, split everything, the money, the exhaustion, the good evenings, and the bad weeks. I looked for something in his face, regret, uncertainty, anything real. He looked back steadily, waiting for the number. All right then. You buy out my share, I said, at fair market value. $850,000, half the real price, not the number you gave Brennan. plus 200,000 in compensation for 4 months of negotiations without my knowledge. Total, $1,050,000. Silence. That's a lot, he said. It's less than a trial, Cassie said. Litigation over breach of fiduciary duty with documented intent is a year to 18 months. Public court records and Crestview will almost certainly reconsider their offer once their name appears in the filing. He was quiet, looking at the pages in front of him. I looked at him and noticed something. I wasn't feeling what I had expected to feel. No full-volume rage, no pain that takes your knees out. Just something quiet and level, like after you take a pot off the burner. That's it. Done. The heat goes out of it. I need time to think, Nate said. 1 week, Cassie said. 7 days. After that, we file. He stood, picked up his jacket, looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in the whole conversation. Maya, he said. He stopped. I waited. Maybe he'd say something true. Maybe he'd explain. Maybe he'd apologize, not because it would change anything, just because it was accurate. You're doing the right thing, he said finally. He turned and walked out. I heard the front door close. Then silence. Cassie shut her laptop. He'll agree, she said. He'll call in 3 days. I know, I said. She gathered her papers. Looked at me, not as a lawyer now, as the person who'd shared a microwave with me 20 years ago. How are you? I looked out across the dining room. 38 tables. 7 years of these walls. The way the light came through the window and landed on the 3rd table on the left, I'd always loved that light. On good evenings, it made the whole room warm. I don't know yet, I said honestly. I'll ask myself later. Cassie nodded, hugged me at the door, left. I was alone in the empty room, walked back to the kitchen. Fixed the sink, just tightened the faucet, a minute's work. Then stood at my station. Put both hands flat on the cold steel surface. These walls, every scratch in this metal, mine. Every burn on my hands, every morning I came in before anyone else and left after everyone else. This was mine before him. It would be mine after. Nate called on the 4th day. I was in the kitchen, the real one, the restaurant kitchen, in the middle of afternoon prep. I saw his name on the screen, told Priya I needed 5 minutes, stepped into the hallway. I accept the terms, he said. No preamble. Good, I said. Maya, a pause. I'm sorry. I stood in the hallway and thought, what exactly are you sorry for? That you did it or that I found it, that you wanted to leave or that you didn't say so? I didn't ask. Some answers stop mattering. Cassie will send the documents, I said. Her attorney will be in touch with yours. And I hung up, went back to the kitchen. Everything okay? Priya asked. Everything's fine, I said. The sauce on 3 needs attention. She looked at me for a second longer than the sauce question required. Priya is smart. She'd understood a lot over those weeks, not everything, but enough. She never asked directly. She just held down the kitchen when I needed to step out. That's the best thing you can do for someone in that situation. Just keep the thing standing that needs to keep standing. The papers were signed a month later. $1,050,000. The divorce came separately, fast, no contest, no drawn-out negotiations. There was nothing else to divide. The restaurant had already been divided. Clean, like cutting with a good knife. Nate went to Crestview Hospitality. I read about it on their website, a small announcement in the team section, a photo of him smiling in someone else's restaurant. I looked at that photo for about a minute, then closed the tab. First thing I did with the money, paid off the original loan, the one we'd taken out to open. For 7 years, I'd watched that number sit in our books, and now it was gone, unexpectedly satisfying, almost physical. Second thing, opened a separate account, just mine. For the first time in my adult life, there was an account with only one name on it. Third thing, gave Priya the promotion I should have given her 2 years ago. She became Sue's chef officially, not just in practice. She deserved the title long before any of this happened. We'd always found a reason to wait. There were no more reasons to wait. 6 months have passed. It's May now. This evening I'm going to Sullivan's, not as the chef, not as a co-owner, just as someone who wants dinner. The name on the sign didn't change. Nate had asked for that as a condition, the only thing he asked for in the whole settlement. I agreed. Sullivan is my name too, for now, we'll see. Lena meets me at the door. She sees me, and for a second her face does something complicated. Then she smiles. Table by the window, third on the left, I say. She nods. Leads me there. I sit down, put my hands on the table, look out at the room. 38 tables. Friday night, 8 o'clock, nearly full. Somewhere on the hot station Priya is calling timing. I can't hear it, but I know. Just like I know that the table on the far right is celebrating something tonight, Lena always puts an extra glass out there in advance. I know that the light at this hour falls exactly like this, warm, angled, the whole room going golden. I built this place. You know what's strange? I don't feel bitterness. Not right now at this table in this light. Maybe it'll come later. Bitterness is unpredictable that way. It shows up when you're not expecting it, at 3 in the morning or on a Sunday when you're making coffee for one. But not tonight. Tonight I'm thinking about something else entirely. In 3 months I'm opening a new place. Small, 24 tables, different neighborhood, different concept. Only my name on the documents. Only my signature wherever a signature is required. I read every page of the operating agreement myself, out loud, with a pencil in hand. It took an entire evening. It was worth every minute. I designed the menu back in November, during those nights when I couldn't sleep and stared at the ceiling beside a man I no longer recognized. My mind kept looking for somewhere to go, and it went where it knows. To flavors, textures, the way things combine that seem like they shouldn't work together. It's a good menu, it turns out. Priya tried 3 dishes and said it was the best work I'd done. She doesn't flatter, I know that too, after all these years. A server brings water, asks if I'm ready to order. I look at the menu. Recognize dishes I introduced over the years, fall, winter, different seasons. Each one with its own small history. The pasta we added in year 1 because the truffle oil supplier gave us a good deal. The tartare I came up with at 3 in the morning after a rough service. The dessert Priya suggested and I initially rejected and then a month later admitted she was right. All of it is here, on these pages. I order the pasta. Simple, garlic, olive oil. The same thing I made that evening. Not out of any dark impulse. I just want to know what it tastes like from here, from this side of the pass, in this light. While I wait, I look out at the room and think about what this year taught me. Not about husbands. Not about trust. That's a longer conversation, and everyone has their own version of it. Something else. I thought I knew my business because I knew my kitchen. That the financial side was his domain, and mine was the food, and together we were a team. It was a good story, a comfortable one. In it, I was the chef and he was the partner and each of us did our part. But in that story, I wasn't reading the contracts. I didn't know the real value of what I'd built. I didn't ask questions about payments I didn't recognize. I called it trust. I called it partnership. Partnership means both people know everything. Not one person knows everything while the other knows the kitchen. That I know for certain now. The food arrives, I try it. Good. Not perfect, the garlic is slightly overdone, half a minute too long in the oil. I would have done it differently. But good. At the table on the right, a woman laughs, the celebration, like I thought. The man across from her is looking at her with the expression people have when they're looking at something they're afraid to lose. I know that look. I've seen it at 100 tables over the years. I hope they're lucky. I mean that, The light in the room shifts, the sun has dropped, Lena has brought up the evening setting. Warm low light, candles on the tables. I chose these candles 3 years ago, drove to a wholesale supplier, stood in a row of identical white columns, and picked these ones specifically, slightly cream-colored, because they gave a different tone to the room. You remember things like that. I finish my water, ask for the check. Lena brings it herself, sets down the folder and stands for a moment. "How was everything?" she asks quietly. "Good," I say. "The garlic on the pasta ran a little long." She smiles. She understands that's not a complaint. That's just me. I leave a good tip, more than the math requires, because I can. Because I remember what it is to work a Friday night and smile at 38 tables when you've stopped feeling your feet. I walk out. May, 8:40 in the evening. Still light, that long spring light I love more than any other. The city moving at its Friday pace all around me. I stand on the sidewalk in front of the restaurant, look up at the sign. Sullivan's. Then I turn and walk. 3 months from now my name will be on a different sign. A different room, different light, different menu. 24 tables and not one document I haven't read. I don't know if it will work. Nobody knows, that's the honest answer, and I've learned to value honest answers. Maybe it works out well, maybe better than here. Maybe differently than I'm imagining, life tends to go differently than you imagine, I have confirmed this. But it will be mine. Completely, legally, on every page, that's enough.